Good morning, evening, afternoon, everyone. I am Tanner. This is Tanner Likes Stuff, and today we're going to talk about how much I like movies because today we're going into my top 40 films of 2021. Now, you might be saying, Tanner, why 40? Why not 50? Why not 25? I don't know. It's just what the number I came up with. 40 felt around the cutoff point in my list. We are going to mention some honorable mentions really quick before we get into the top 40. But 40 felt like about where the good stuff really started separating itself from the pack. So at the time of recording, I've watched 61 2021 films. I'm sure that'll increase, and this list may be fluid. You can see the most up-to-date list, by the way, over on my Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/TannerLikes if you want to see about the living fluid list as I see more of these movies. But right now, everybody's doing their end-of-year stuff, so I thought I'd join the bandwagon here and give you my top 40 2021 films. Before we get into those 40, I know it's a lot of preamble. Before we get into the 40, I need to define for me what a 2021 film is. So between COVID and the normal film festival screeners circuit, some films will say they came out in 2020, or in one case on this list, 2019, but I am counting whatever the year that the public release in the US was. To me, that is the year the movie came out. For video games and for albums, it's a lot easier because they're normally released at the same time everywhere. But because of screeners and film festivals, sometimes you will get split years on movies. So I understand if not everybody agrees with that determination. That should also apply to films like Worst Person in the World. There are a few other films making the sort of top 2021 list that you can't actually see unless you have a screener right now. I'm not going to count those in this year's list, and those would apply to a 2022 list, again, whenever they're available to rent or go see in a theater or whatever, to the mass public, which is what I am. I have no special privileges or screening abilities, so that to me is what a 2021 movie is. I should also say that this list is completely fluid, and if we disagree, that's great. I would love to hear what your lists are and how we disagree and how you hate some movies that I put somewhere and where are the other movies that I obviously missed. Please tell me all that. I love all the discussion. We can have as many comment discussions as you all want. I think that's the fun of enjoying movies or any kind of art, so feel free to tear me apart in the comments. So the pacing of this is going to be pretty quick to start out the video. I'm only going to spend a little bit of time with the early movies just so that this video isn't 2 hours long. And as we go up the list, I will start sharing more why I love the movies at the top of the list. But just for the sake of time, that's the way we're going to do it. So honorable mentions, these are not numbered. These are all kind of in the same honorable mention group. I just want to shout out Encanto, a movie that I thought was very cute, but personally didn't connect a lot with me. I've heard from other people. Granted, I am a white dude, and this movie is all about Latin culture. I've heard of a lot of friends who have experienced that growing up, that it connected with them, which is awesome. I've also heard that maybe if you have a larger family, this movie is a pretty large family, that might help connect. I'm an only child, kind of. So that stuff didn't really hit home with me. This is not my favorite Pixar movie of the year or of recent memory that I've seen, but it's really cute. It's a Pixar movie. You can't really go wrong. They know how to make movies. So this may connect more with you than it did me, but it just didn't have anything for me to personally really sink my teeth into. Some of the songs are fun, though. We also have Ride the Eagle, which is the Jake Johnson indie comedy kind of thing where his mom, Susan Sarandon, has passed away and left him a list of requests for him to be able to accept the inheritance of her very nice cabin. He wrote the movie. His dog is his dog in the movie, which is maybe my favorite part. The dog's amazing. This is okay. It's kind of exactly what you expect it to be. It's fun enough. If you're looking for just sort of a chill background watch, maybe turn it on. I really like Jake Johnson as an actor. He's an okay writer, but I think a better actor here, and it's fine. There are some really cute moments, and I did laugh a few times. It's got some value, just not a whole lot of substance. Another honorable mention here is John in the Hole. This is a very weird horror movie, and shout out to Lucy on Letterboxd, who summed this movie up better than I could, shorter than I could, which is basically what if Yorgos Lanthimos directed Home Alone. That is the best way I can describe this movie, and again, all credit to her there. It's a very weird movie. If you like that sort of Yorgos Lanthimos, unnerving, unsettling, unfamiliar, a lot of unwords, you may dig this. Not going to be for everybody. I don't know that I really got the message it was trying to share, but it was entertaining. The Card Counter. This is Oscar Isaac being Oscar Isaac, which is always great. there were some really, really good pieces of filmmaking here, especially when he was at the table playing cards. I just didn't really love the story outside of that. I wish they had focused more on the card aspect, or maybe not the gameplay aspect, but the gambling aspect of his life, as opposed to sort of what brought him to the table, which is what the movie was about. I thought that was just okay and kind of a basic plot. I really liked Oscar Isaac's on-screen chemistry with Tiffany Haddish, though. I thought that was really fun. They are a good pairing, and that makes this movie worth a watch. Again, there's also some really, really nice scenes, but definitely has lulls of nothingness to go with that. So, you know, if you like Oscar Isaac enough, he's definitely Oscar Isaacing in this movie, and so there are worse things. Okay, last honorable mention before we get into the official top 40. We have Belfast. This is Kenneth Branagh's semi-autobiographical things can still be happy in the midst of turmoil in Ireland movie. I thought this movie was really sweet when I watched it. It kind of has a Forrest Gump quality about it that, despite all these historical, somewhat terrible things happening around the character, the main character kind of stays positive, and that's sort of the message. I will say, I liked this movie more immediately after watching than I have in the month or two that have come after me seeing it. I think the reason it's just on the outside looking in of the top 40 here is that it just really didn't stick with me at all. There's not a lot I remember from this movie, and I thought it was pretty cute, and that was about it. So it's an enjoyable watch. There's nothing wrong with this film. It just, for whatever reason, hasn't stuck with me. All right, here we go. The official top 40. Starting at number 40, we have Coda. This is the movie about the child of deaf adults, which is Coda, where Emilia Jones is the only hearing child of two deaf parents and a deaf brother. I almost really didn't like this movie in the first half. So the thing I didn't know about Coda that I think you should know about it is that it almost is a musical in a way that I did not expect. I try to go into movies now without really watching trailers. If I hear good buzz, or really if I hear buzz at all, I will normally watch it if I can get my hands on it at this point. So I didn't know a lot about this movie coming in other than that initial premise that I just said to you. So I was really surprised, and it took me a long time to get into the, maybe it's not a musical, but very like Glee episode feel of the first half of this movie. The first half feels to me like a polished up Disney Channel movie. And I mean that sort of as a diss, but not entirely. I will say the second half of this movie really shines, and that's when it kind of comes into its own, of this contrast of the main character, who her passion is obviously music and singing, but her parents and brother can never hear it. That is a cool concept, and I like the way that they execute that for the most part. I kind of kept waiting for this movie to blossom into itself, and it finally did, but it did take a little while. And so that's why it is number 40 in my list. At number 39, we have Undine, or Undine, or Undine. This is a German film, and I will be completely honest, I didn't love this movie when I first watched it, but something about it has stuck in my craw to where I feel like it had to be on this list. I will also admit that I may not be the smartest person when it comes to this movie, because I didn't fully understand it. So an Undine, or an Undine, or however you want to say that word, is a mythical water nymph, I believe. And I didn't know this going in. I didn't know that it was based on this sort of myth, fairy tale type thing, and it was a modern retelling of that. Knowing that now, and reading up about kind of this surrealist film that I had just watched immediately after, I did start to appreciate it more. So I would, if I were you, this is one of the rare times where I say, go learn information. Go learn about what an Undine is, and then come back to the film and watch it from there, because I think you'll appreciate it a lot more than I did on a very confusing first watch. I know a lot of people are absolutely crazy about this movie. Like, they love this movie. I get it. It's a very visually striking film. I love the way it handles water as a whole, as sort of, the running through line. You could say a river runs through this movie. But at the same time, there were elements of it that I didn't really understand how they connected to that. Like, why is she talking about the fall of East and West Berlin at her job? And like, what is the different conflicts with the boyfriends have to do with it? This is on me, I think, more than the movie, but not all of the elements connected. But I still enjoyed it, and I think about it from time to time. So that's good. At number 38, we have Shang Chi and the Ten Rings. This is my second favorite Marvel movie of the year. We'll get to my first favorite later. This does not break the mold very much when it comes to MCU stuff. It is a little bit cookie cutter. It is a little bit Marvel formulaic. But what I really liked about it, or at least I liked about the first 3/4 of it, was how grounded it was for the MCU. It was Simu Liu, who I thought was great in this, doing a lot of hand-to-hand combat and, sort of punch-kicky stuff as opposed to shooting lasers at each other or having some ridiculous weapon or some god trying to fight some other god. It was a little more grounded in that aspect, and I really enjoyed that. That felt like a nice change of pace for Marvel. I also really liked Destin Cratton's directorial style. I thought the way he shot some of the really big action scenes was super interesting and gave it just enough of a difference compared to the MCU stuff that I started to really latch onto it. Now, the problem with the Shang-Chi and why it's not higher on my list is the last quarter/third of the movie. Of course, it being Marvel, there has to be some huge CGI battle. This film is no different in that, and it does have it. And to me, that's when I completely tuned out. It didn't really make sense to me that this sort of grounded story would go where it ended up. And I hated the way this movie ended. The first hour and a half or so is really fun, and there's a lot of good stuff to bite into in this movie. I wish it ended differently because that really turned me off quite a bit. At number 37, much to my surprise, is The Matrix Resurrection. So this is the most recent watch in this list. I literally watched it last night as of recording, and I expected to fully hate it. I had heard such terrible things about this movie. I'm not a huge fan of Matrix 2 and 3. I think The Matrix 1 is a perfect movie for what it was going for. But the Matrix sequels never really connected with me. Now, granted, I haven't watched them since I was young, so maybe I would like them more now. But what I liked about this movie and what I keep coming back to when people have asked me about it the last couple of days is it just fucking goes for it. Like, it's just, when will we ever get a blockbuster this weird again? It's bizarre and meta. It definitely tries some things that don't work. It also tries some things that I think kind of do work. The action scenes are hit or miss. Everything in this movie is kind of hit or miss. And I understand for some people that is a major turnoff. For me, I just kind of appreciated that it was swinging all the time. Like, this movie does not bunt at all. It's either home runs or strikeouts for this thing, and I kind of loved that. I appreciate that this movie didn't drag us down too much into, like, the Zion, Sentinels, all of that kind of storyline, and kept most of it in the actual Matrix, which I think is the strength of this series. Nobody really cares about all of the Zion stuff to me. Yeah, I thought this was kind of fun. I enjoyed it. And now granted, I did split it up over 2 nights. Maybe that helps with sort of the denseness of it. This film loves to throw a proper noun at you, like all the Matrix stuff does. Maybe my low expectations made it a little bit better, but I had fun with it. And you know what? I would rather rewatch this than like a Shang-Chi, which is probably a better movie, but less interesting. So take that how you will. At number 36, we have My Heart Can't Beat Unless You Tell It To. You may have seen me glance over there. I always forget this title because it's such a mouthful. This is what Rotten Tomatoes has rated as the top horror film of 2021, coming in a little bit lower than that on my list. I think this movie is best summed up as one of the better Twilight Zone episodes. It has that feel to it. Now, granted, it's not sci-fi or techie in any way, but it has the feel of this concept is so cool and worthy of making a movie, but they could have done more with said concept. I liked the shots in this. I really liked the performances in this. I kind of want to see Jonathan Quarta's other stuff. I thought his directorial style was interesting. Patrick Fugit I thought was great in this. The cast, like, everything was solid in this movie. It was just a little bit too spaced out for me. This movie's only 90 minutes, but you could really feel every minute. And that's not my favorite thing in movies. I thought they could have squeezed in 1 or 2 really more unsettling moments, because this movie does have those. They're just too far between a little bit for my liking. But again, the concept, don't want to spoil it. You can look it up if you're never going to watch the movie, I guess, because it's cool. But watch the movie because the concept is really fun. But that's the main selling point, really, so. Number 35, we have A Quiet Place Part 2. I really, really liked A Quiet Place Part 1. I know some people aren't a fan of the logical fallacies of the first one, and if you don't like the logical fallacies of the first one, you're definitely not going to like the second one. But as far as mainstream horror sequels go, this was about as good as we've gotten, at least of series that I pay attention to. I thought John Krasinski did a pretty decent job directing this. I thought the writing for the most part was okay. There are a few moments where the characters only seem to do things in order to move the plot along as opposed to actually having motivations to do things. There's still a really great anxiety that comes from this setting. And seeing this in theater, this is actually my first film back in theaters post Lockdown 1, I guess is what we're going to end up calling it. So that obviously helped. Seeing a movie this quiet among not a big crowd, but a crowd of people will definitely add to the tension. And again, I don't think this is going to like blow your face off or anything, but it was a solid continuation of the series. What's funny is how similar this movie is to Last of Us 2 and the first movie to The Last of Us 1. The first movie could have definitely been inspired by Last of Us 1. This one would have been written around the same time as Last of Us 2, so it's weird that those coincidences are there and like very prominent to me. But overall, it's a fun watch. If you like the first one, definitely give this one a shot. At number 34, we have Don't Look Up. This is the Adam McKay, very satirical, political commentary film from Netflix here at the end of the year. And I thought this was decent. I thought it was pretty good. Everything in this list at this point I think is good. It's just how, varying levels of good or how it connected with me. This one I wish was about an hour shorter. It's 2.5 hours, which I think is too long for something this snarky. It takes a little too much time for me getting to the absurdity level that I would want something this satirical to get to. I think like the last hour of this is great. I just wish the first hour and a half was a lot more condensed. I will say too, as someone who liked The Big Short, I know some people like hate Adam McKay's directing style, and to each their own. I'm not gonna diss anybody. I don't really feel super one way or the other about it. In Big Short, it was definitely, you could tell the writing in that was so knowledgeable about the subject. And I think with this, that comes across in some ways, and in other ways, it can come across as like old man yells at cloud. Specifically when this movie is talking about sort of social media and modern tech and all of that. It comes off a little out of touch. So, for example, there's a scene where one of the characters kind of becomes a meme on some morning show because it's Jennifer Lawrence's character, and she's trying to warn everyone that this meteor is coming. That becomes a meme of her like basically losing her shit on this morning show. And they go back and have like a debriefing about it. And they say that she has become a meme, but the ratings were super low. And like those things don't equate. It would be one where like the meme would make the ratings skyrocket. That didn't make a lot of sense to me. Also, the memes in this were so like 2014 memes. Everything just felt a little off to me when it came to all that stuff. But some of the snarky satire was really, really good. Again, once it gets to the actual like Don't Look Up portion of the film, the absurdity there is so high that I love it. I think it's fairly obvious what this film is. The point of this film is trying to make pretty early on, and how it applies to modern day. And the direction it goes is not surprising, but some of the little jabs at different political powers and parties and the approach to science and all that, it's weird. There's a lot to like with that movie, but also a lot to like diss. So I liked it, but I could be very critical of it if I wanted to be, but I just kind of laughed at it, and that's, I think, the point. Number 33, we have The Eyes of Tammy Faye. This doesn't really reinvent the biopic wheel by any means, but what it does do is give us an incredible Jessica Chastain performance. When I first read that Jessica Chastain was going to play Tammy Faye Baker, I was very confused because I could not figure out how their faces worked together. But that being said, she is the best in this role. Like, this may be my favorite Jessica Chastain performance. I think that she is amazing in this. She could be in the Oscar conversation for this. I think Andrew Garfield also is amazing as Jim Baker. Their chemistry is so awkward and kind of real, but kind of not. And it really does a good job of replicating Jim and Tammy Faye's real life sort of chemistry. And again, like, the story is pretty, boilerplate following the events of her life, but Jessica Chastain makes you feel sort of every emotion about Tammy Faye, from sympathetic and loving to confusion and distaste. And she's a very complex person in real life, and Jessica Chastain does an amazing job of presenting that on screen. I think Michael Showalter does a really good job of allowing Jessica Chastain to really command this performance and not getting in her way too much. I also think the costume and set design in this is great. If you're interested in Tammy Faye or want to know about her or want to see a really stellar actor performance, definitely give this a shot. At number 32, Strawberry Mansion. This might be the singular weirdest movie on this list, and it is not left my brain since I watched it. So this is a movie based in this weird retro future where dreams are audited by tax auditors, and anything that is in your dream that's not a person, you have to pay a tax for. That is already a strange concept, and this movie goes even stranger directions from there. I don't want to get too much into it because everything is kind of a spoiler in this movie, but I love the vibe of it. I love the look of this movie. The fact that, like, it's in the future, but it's almost, the props are almost like from some 50s B movie, and it's shot on like old film, and they're driving 50s cars, but then like the dreams are stored on VHS tapes, and then there's also tablets, and it's such a weird, unique hodgepodge of different time elements that I really dug. I've never seen a setting quite like this, and that's always a fun thing. I also think Kentucker Audley, which, what a name, by the way. I think he's really good in this. I like his performance. I really like a lot of the performances. This movie is not everybody's cup of tea, and some people may think this is one of the worst movies of the year. I get that. I loved how surrealist and art housey it was. This is probably the most art housey film on the list, and it just has really stuck with me, and that's always a valuable thing. At number 31, we have The Beta Test. This is directed and starred in by Jim Cummings and PJ McCabe, who are the main characters, who are film packagers, which I didn't know what that was before this movie. And this movie kind of takes on a lot of different genres. It's a dark comedy, it's a drama, it's a thriller, and there's a lot here that I really enjoyed. I will say it does get a little too specific in some of its satirical critiques of Hollywood, to the fact that, to the point where it kind of closes out a layman like me, where some of these jabs at, the Hollywood elites or the way movies are made, I guess, are so specific that unless you know that industry incredibly well, they're just not going to land. But there is a lot that I did really like here. The more vague shots at Hollywood were fun. The critiques of technology and modern dating were really on point. This is kind of the opposite of Don't Look Up in this regard. It really knows how to handle tech, and you can tell it's written by people who really understand that world of social media and tech. And I also just think the idea of getting this random letter in the mail that says, hey, you're invited to a one-night only dream kink affair is an interesting concept, and I like the way it plays out for the most part. It's not going to blow your socks off, but it's a fun watch, and there's some pretty good jokes. Coming in at number 30, we have The Night House. This is a very interesting, dark thriller, horror, suspense kind of movie. For the most part, really delivers on that thriller concept. You might have seen the trailer for this movie. The idea basically being that Rebecca Hall's character, her husband has passed away. They live in this beautiful lake house. He has some sort of sketches for a house that doesn't seem to align with hers, and she's confused by it, and that's sort of where the thriller starts. There was a lot of really interesting stuff happening in this movie. I keep saying interesting because it is a very intriguing movie. My only real critique of it, weirdly, is that I think there are one too many good ideas, and I think there are several twists in this movie. And I almost wish there was one less, because not all of them really landed for me as a cohesive plot, and could at points feel like a gotcha moment, which is always the worst outcome for some sort of twist. But the directing of this was beautiful. I thought the mood of it was really cool. Rebecca Hall, for the most part, really impressed me in this. Her accent does slip a couple times, which for some reason really distracted me. I don't notice that normally, but you could definitely tell she was not an American doing an American accent a few times. It doesn't really matter, but I just remember I watched this movie like 6 months ago, and that still stuck with me for some reason. I enjoyed this a lot. I just wish it had gone. It almost felt like the writers thought this was the only movie they would ever get to make, and they've had a couple of cool ideas flowing in their brain, so they just thought they'd put them all in this, where I wish they had kept one and done it in a different movie, just because all of the twists don't really connect for me. I like them individually, they just don't fit together as a whole thing for me. At number 29, we have Seance. This movie conceptually is maybe the most straightforward on the list. It's a bunch of girls at a boarding school and there's a ghost. And that's basically it. That is the premise of this movie. And I know what you're thinking, because I was thinking the same thing. That sounds very much like some 80s B movie, right? Well, it does. But the thing is, this film delivers on that concept in a way a lot of those movies don't. It's definitely inspired by old Giallo stuff. There's a lot of Suspiria influence in this. I'm not by any means an expert on Giallo, but even I can tell, there's like the Black Glove Killer stuff and the way they shoot some of the deaths. I've seen just a small portion of Giallo and want to see more of it, but even I can appreciate the influence that's had on this movie with some of the lighting and all of that sort of stuff. So the Giallo influence mixed with, modern storytelling, which I think Simon Barrett writes a really solid script here. And I thought the shots were really nice. And Suki Waterhouse is so cool in this. Like, she's one of the most effortlessly cool actors and characters that I've seen in a movie all year. And so while the concept may not be the most intriguing thing in the world, it just kind of delivers. It's not offensive in any way. It doesn't treat you like you're an idiot, which I always appreciate in a movie. It didn't make me feel like I was stupid. And I think it just does everything the right way. It's a really solid, fun, lighter popcorn horror movie. And that's cool by me. At number 28, we have Luca. This is probably my favorite Pixar movie this year, although that's not an area that I'm super knowledgeable in, at least modern Pixar. But this, of course, is the movie about how a fish boy turns into a human boy at times and sort of the conflict there within. It's cute as hell. It's an easy watch. I cried multiple times. It's relaxing in an interesting way. Nothing ever goes so awry that it's like stressful, but of course there's enough tension there to keep a plot going. I enjoyed the hell out of this. Again, it is not reinventing the wheel. It's probably not in the Pixar Mount Rushmore, but it's just, sometimes you just need a chill movie, Sometimes you need a movie that you can relax to and turn your brain off a little bit and just kind of enjoy for what it is. And this is one of those movies for me. Maybe it was the right time and place. I think I may be a little higher on this than some people are, but I think it's nice. It's a nice little cute movie. And this is one of those movies that could appeal to a 2-year-old or a 90-year-old. And there's something to be said about that. It's a very universally easy to watch movie. At number 27, we have Jane Campion's Power of the Dog. This is the modern Western starring Benedict Cumberbatch over on Netflix. I thought it was pretty good. I really liked some of the bones of the plot here. Benedict Cumberbatch is this sort of loner, off-putting, eccentric cowboy. I thought was a fun start for a main character, and I like a lot of where this story went. Despite being this Old West setting, it feels like a very modern story, which is a huge compliment to it. I thought some of the shots were beautiful. It also stars my beloved Jesse Plemons, who I think is incredible. He is a chameleon, and I love him in this. I actually really love Kirsten Dunst in her role, too. I think everybody brings a lot to their role in this movie. I didn't quite have the connection with this that I did other movies this year, but it's so solid and the plot is super interesting. It's based on a book, so there's a lot of layers to the storytelling and sort of the character interactions. And man, shout out to Cody Smith-McPhee, because what a commanding performance that they give. Overall, super solid, definitely worth a watch. Could totally see this moving up in my list, or people digging it even more than I do, and I really liked it. At number 26, we have Dune. This is Denis Villeneuve. This is his sci-fi epic. I think most people are aware of what Dune is. I fully went into this not expecting to connect with it because I have never seen the original Dune. I've never read the books. I have no connection to the Dune franchise whatsoever. And I ended up kind of attaching to it a little bit. Something about it really stuck with me. And I think that's powerful. I will say that this spot, number 26 in this rating, may hinge solely on whether the sequel kind of delivers the promise of this first film, because this is definitely the start to something, but it is not an incredible standalone film. It could be an incredible start, but if this is all the Dune we ever get, it'll be kind of a disappointment. So this is almost the placing of this in the list is just hoping that it delivers. The cast is great. Obviously, the shots are amazing. Denis' camera is beautiful, and I really love how he can structure such a massive world and galaxy of interesting characters, but yet still keep the story so narrow on just a few people. I think that's an amazing skill, and is how you get someone like me who can easily tune out to sci-fi and fantasy stuff to really buy in. I am bought in, and I hope Dune 2, they're not going to call it Tune, but I kind of hope they do. I hope that Dune 2 is a great payoff to what this promises. All right, we're in the top 25, starting with number 25, The Lost Daughter. This is Maggie Gyllenhaal's directorial debut. This movie just dropped on Netflix not that long ago. Olivia Colman, Jessie Buckley, Dakota Johnson, Dagmara, whose last name I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce, who is on Succession, Ed Harris, Peter Sarsgaard. This cast is really, really dope. And I thought the story was pretty interesting too. I think Maggie Gyllenhaal has a lot of promise for this being her first directorial thing. She gets so much out of her actors. Now, granted, Olivia Colman, all the names I just listed are incredible actors, so, you know, that's probably part of it. Who knew Olivia Colman and Jessie Buckley can act? But also, I think the tone of this movie is super interesting, and I don't want to spoil exactly what the message is, but this film's approach to showcasing motherhood specifically, and not making it the most pristine thing, but showing all sides of what being a mother is, I think is an incredible depiction for someone like me who will never know what it means to be a mother. And I really appreciate that. It's not a tone you see in film too often, and I personally don't know if I've seen a film with this sort of honest look into being a mother. I know that Olivia Colman everyone sings the praises of Olivia Colman. To me, the star of this, and someone who I am buying all of the actor stock in the world in after this and my favorite movie of 2020, I'm Thinking of Ending Things, is Jessie Buckley. She is phenomenal in this, and I hope to see her in all the movies because she's so good, and I love watching her act. I love the nuance in her face when she acts, and I can get very passionate about her acting performances. The visuals of this, I thought, were pretty decent. You know, there were some lull moments if we're getting really nitpicky, but I think it's definitely worth a watch, and everything from here on out is going to be a big recommend from me. At 24, we have The Suicide Squad. I was so hyped for this movie, and you know what? It paid off. This movie feels like it came out 4 years ago, though, because it was toward the beginning of 2021 when I watched it. But as someone who actually didn't hate, not saying I love, but didn't hate the original Suicide Squad, and someone who really, really, really liked Birds of Prey, Kathy Ann, I thought was an incredible director in that film. This is such a good place for this franchise to be in now. I will always adore Margot Robbie and everything, but especially as Harley Quinn, who was growing up probably one of my favorite Batman characters of all time, still probably is one of my favorite Batman characters of all time. The way they choose to just kind of go bonkers in this movie is so fun, and I respect how dark comedy it is, I guess. It's just a fun, balls to the wall, oh my god, John Cena can kind of act, that's surprising experience from top to bottom. I had a blast with this movie. I don't want to spoil too much of it, but it is colorful and strange, and the way they choose to depict action is always fresh and refreshing in every action scene. And yeah, I think this movie's super solid. At number 23, we have Zola. This is the movie based on a Twitter thread, weirdly enough, directed by Janixa, I hope I'm saying her name correctly, Janixa Bravo. Zola is so good at depicting stuff that we as a society sometimes want to embrace and sometimes don't. I think that is the biggest strength of Zola, where at times this movie is sexy and sultry and mysterious, and other times it's in your face and gross and like shoving your nose in the darkest side of human nature. And it treats both of those things with the exact same respect. And I absolutely love that about this movie. I've never read the Twitter thread, so all of it was kind of a surprise for me. There are moments in this that are some of my favorite standout scenes in all of 2021. I think Taylor Page and Riley Keough are both incredible in this. Shout out as well to the homie Nicholas Braun. Yeah, this movie's super fun. It may not reach the highs of some films for me, as far as like really swelling and connecting with characters and all that kind of stuff. But as a look into a world, I think this nails it. And again, some of the scene, there's some really hilarious scenes in this. It can be a little one note, but when that note's singing, it sounds great. At number 22, we have The Novice. This film is directed by Lauren Hadaway. It's starring Isabel Fuhrman, who you may know from The Orphan or Hunger Games or some other things. And this movie is about a woman's drive to be on the rowing team at her college. I know that may sound like a very simple plot, and in ways it is, but this movie is very reminiscent of Whiplash, which I think some of the crew had worked on, and also stuff like Black Swan. It is a movie about the dangers of pursuing perfection and what that can do to a person and how toxic that can be. And that is a gold mine of storytelling for me. Like, I will watch movies with that plot for a long time to come. I think there needs to be more of these sort of people driving themselves crazy in the pursuit of this weird goal type stories. And this is a really good example of that. I was transfixed with this movie, never looked away. It's got a 90-minute runtime, and it takes full advantage of that. Like, it can be a little repetitious, as rowing can be, so I think that's a little bit on purpose. This is definitely worth a watch if you like those kinds of stories. If you liked Whiplash, if you like Black Swan, this will definitely be up your alley, and you should give it a shot. Also, quick shout out, Isabel Fuhrman's fucking awesome. Holy shit, is she just so in this role that it's really breathtaking, and I think one of my sleeper favorite actor performances this year. Number 21, we have The Mitchells vs. the Machines. This is my favorite animated movie of the year. This is from the Sony animation team that did Into the Spider-Verse, and that style is all throughout this, and I absolutely love looking at that style. I'm a graphic designer, and the visual style of this film appeals so much to me, and they throw so much at you that it can come off almost visually dense at times, but in a really fun way. This idea of this not great, doesn't always get along family fighting robot overlords is a pretty simple plot, but it goes a lot of interesting places. I think it's a pretty good critique on our technological leanings. And I also just think it's really fun and funny. Like, I was laughing multiple times. There's a scene in this where they go to a mall and all of the smart objects start attacking them, and I was cackling at the way they approach some of this. A minor spoiler here. As these smart devices are starting to swarm toward the family, Roombas are coming toward them and hit an escalator and just flip over. It's little stuff like, look, I'm easy to please, okay? There are little jokes like that all throughout this movie. This movie has a lot of heart. It's very sweet. I did not check my watch one time watching it. I'm not even sure what the runtime is, but it felt like it flew by, and it's super entertaining. This movie has a lot of my heart and deserves this spot on the list. Coming in at number 20, we have Licorice Pizza. Maybe the wildest wild card for me on whether this movie could move up 10 spots in a year or could move down 10 spots. I still don't quite know how I feel about Licorice Pizza. I think it's really good. I don't know if I absolutely loved it the way I expected to going in, though. This movie needs no introduction if you're into film at this point. It's directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. It's Alana Haim. It's Cooper Hoffman. It's Bradley Cooper. There's a lot of star power, and my main takeaway in this is, oh my God, Alana Haim can act. She's incredible in this. Cooper Hoffman is great and has a future super bright ahead of him. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room with this movie because I think you have to. The fact that she is 25 and he is 15 is not a spoiler. That's in the trailer. It's kind of the concept of the film. Everyone is going to take different things from this. You know, it is a movie, so I would not go as far as to... I don't love the fact that some people are projecting people's enjoyment of this movie as them enjoying that dynamic. You know, you could like a movie where a guy kills 15 people. That doesn't mean you've killed 15 people. So I think we should maybe detach a little bit of that critique around this movie. It is, however, apparent watching the movie that this is the dynamic. They don't shy away from that. But to me, it also is kind of this cloud looming over this fun, cute love story. I really wish they had just made it where Cooper Hoffman was 18 and Alana Haim was 28, which is actually closer to their real life ages. Because then I think a lot of this narrative would have gone away. Now you could say, look, Harold and Maude exists, where a 20-year-old falls in love with an 80-year-old or whatever old she is. Like, these stories have been told. Enjoying this movie is not an approval of that. You know what I mean? So I'm just getting that out of the way. Again, Alana Haim's performance in this is amazing. I cannot wait to see her in other stuff if she continues to act. I also really like Haim the band, so if they want to keep doing that, that's fine. I thought the first 2/3 of this were a blast. I thought the last third of it happens so quick, and they try to pack a lot of stuff into the last 30 minutes, and it just kind of ends, which I didn't really connect with. I thought the ending was super rushed for a movie that's 2.5 hours long. Like, I actually kind of wanted it to be longer or for less stuff to happen in the last 30 minutes. It just felt like they just tried to pack too much in. It almost struck me that this could have worked better as a miniseries, maybe, but it is a movie. That's okay. I think it's a really good movie. I still just don't know exactly how I feel about it. What it does well, it does extremely well, and it is a very fun time for most of it. At number 19, we have Spider-Man No Way Home. Spoiler alert, this is the highest rated superhero movie I have this year. I did not expect... I love Spider-Man. I mean, you can see there's 5 Spider-Man Funko Pops in the back of this video. If it's not, it might be blocked by the panel. But I love Spider-Man. I have a Spider-Verse print in my living room. Outside of Batman, he's my favorite superhero, even from going back to growing up. And I also think Spider-Man is the best property under the Marvel umbrella, not only in terms of characters, but also in terms of the way they've managed their films. I think Spider-Man has been handled way better than a lot of the other MCU properties, and that is why this movie feels like it pays off so well. I'm not going to spoil it. I'm sure if you wanted to try to avoid spoilers, it's been impossible to, but this movie is a payoff to a lot of things, and I think that is a really incredible accomplishment. Now, will I want to see this movie again in 5 years? Probably. Will it connect with me the same? I don't know. I have no idea. But all I can speak to is in the theater, the hype of Stone Cold coming out on a 90s episode of Raw was there in some of the moments in this, with just the people cheering at different appearances, and just the amount of storytelling they pack into this movie without it ever feeling too dense is really impressive. I cried 4 times. I don't know if I was just having a day or if the movie's amazing, but that is my take on it. I've only seen it once, and I can only tell you what I saw. And I don't feel like I have to justify it. Spider-Man's amazing, but this is probably my favorite Marvel movie ever. If not, it's in the top 3 for sure. And yeah, I'm a little surprised I'm even saying that, but it's true. Number 18, we have Summer of Soul, or When the Revolution Could Not Be Televised. As far as documentaries go, and as far as music documentaries go, this is exactly how I want them to be done. Questlove directs this, and obviously Questlove loves music. That is his life. That is his career. But you can feel the love of music in every ounce of this film. It does such a wonderful job of letting the songs and the artists actually breathe. So many movies in this ilk would show you 5 seconds of a song and then let that song play in the background as people talk over it. This movie almost treats it as a dual documentary and just concert footage, because it will just let a song play out entirely, and then we'll tell you more about the background of the event, or the historical context of when this Harlem festival was going on. All of that stuff is super important. The shining star of this movie is the music, as it was of the festival, and I think that's just brilliant. I love the way Questlove directs here. I can't wait to see if he directs something else. I love that this story is finally being told, because I personally had never heard of the Harlem Cultural Festival. I love that it happened now. I love the footage from it. There's some hilarious, sort of man-on-the-ground news reporters asking people at the festival about news events that were happening, and seeing the take of the black community in New York versus sort of the White House buttoned up press release aspect of certain news things is incredible. And it gives you such a great perspective on what it would have been like to actually be there, not only at the festival, but at this point in time. I love the interviews of this. I love that they do the sort of last dance thing of showing the interviewee the footage and letting them react to the footage. I think that's a beautiful way to do any sort of retrospective documentary like this. I could gush about this film for hours. If you're not like dancing watching this movie, because I think I was doing dishes during portions of this film. If you're not like bopping while you're watching it, like I don't understand how you could not. It's so fun and such a worthwhile story, and I'm obviously just beaming talking about it because it's so fun. Number 17, we have Together Together, one of the sweetest films directly for adults that I've seen. This movie is so wonderful at navigating such a complex idea. So Nicole Beckwith directs as Ed Helms and someone who I had never seen before, but now I'm in love with, Patty Harrison. As Ed Helms is this single man trying to have a baby with a surrogate who is Patty Harrison, and their sort of blossoming relationship, not saying relationship necessarily in a romantic way, but just the relationship between these two people. I think this movie does a lot of things incredibly smartly, and I think it's aware of how smart it is because it references a couple of properties that aren't as smart directly, specifically referencing Friends and also referencing making fun of Woody Allen movies, which is a great little scene. This movie is funny and has a lot of heart and is even saccharine at times, but it works. It's a wonderful watch with a lot of great little underpinnings of sadness, but in a way that is not depressing, really. I cried in this movie. I think it's just wonderful and such an easy watch and so full of life, weirdly. I don't know. I would happily rewatch this, and it's super nice little movie. At number 16, we have Nitram, a movie that came out of absolutely nowhere for me. I don't want to spoil necessarily what this is about. This movie is directed by Justin Kurzel, and it stars Caleb Landry Jones, who is phenomenal in this. Basically, it's about, without spoiling anything, and I would suggest don't look up a synopsis because I think that will greatly ruin this movie for you. This eccentric guy who lives in Australia, just sort of the way he navigates the world. I don't want to give up much of this story at all because I didn't know much of this story at all, and I think that's why it connected so much with me. I understand that if you live in Australia and you can kind of see where this is going, I don't even want to say anything else because I don't want to spoil this. The slow burn of this movie is one of my favorite slower pacings of any film that I've seen this year. I think it delivers so much emotion and heartbreak, and it's such a depressing, uncomfortable, anxious film, but it does that so well. You know, whether this is the truest depiction of things that happen, who knows, but as far as a movie goes, I thought this was one of the more nuanced, complex, well-written, well-shot films of 2021. All right, top 15. We're getting to the real heavy hitters now. Number 15, Minari, a movie that I kind of forgot was this year because it was so early on in the year. All right, so it's the top 15 now. A bunch of heavy hitters. Number 15, we have Minari. This is the Lee Isaac Chung film starring Steven Yeun and a bunch of incredible actors. This was already in the Oscar circuit for 2021, but it came out early 2021 in the public release. This is probably the sweetest movie I've seen all year. It is so cute and wonderful and easygoing and such an interesting depiction of 70s and 80s rural culture. It's funny, I am not of Korean descent as the characters are who migrated over to America in this movie, but this story, I could apply my own rural Kentucky upbringing and family's history to a lot of the elements of this story. My papaw has a lot of the same characteristics that Steven Yeun does in this, and maybe that's one of the reasons it connected so much with me. You know, I've known people who are farmers who, you know, had to farm to get any sort of money. All they cared about was their family and making sure they could provide for them, and, you know, maybe they don't have the most money at all, but they love each other and all of that kind of stuff. And I know it might be a little basic, but I think this plays those chords so beautifully. I also just think that everyone's performance in this is dope. From Steven Yeun to Han Yeri to Yoon Yo Jung, like everybody is so like, and little Alan Kim is the cutest thing in the world. Like this movie is just about as well done as a movie of this ilk could be. Again, this is one of those movies I could see jumping several spots. I might just have like recency bias toward other things more, but man, this movie is so cute and sweet and just, it's like a warm hug. I love it. I love this movie so much. Coming in at number 14, we have Judas and the Black Messiah. You want to talk about a breathtaking story with amazing direction and jaw-dropping performances. This is there's no better place to look than Judas and the Black Messiah. This is a real thing that happened in America, in the United States, just over 50 years ago, and the fact that the stories like this still feel shocking is a damning critique of the American educational system, that we're not taught about what happened to the Black Panthers, and just about how we as a country have continued to fail people of color for centuries now. Also, all of that being said, holy shit, this movie, like, it is just jam-packed with emotion and performance, and so often with these sort of historical films, it can be a little bit harder to connect with some of the characters, right? They were real people, so maybe they don't have quite the cartoonish levels of X or Y that a written character would. That is not the case with this movie. I was so enthralled with everyone. Like, the cast is so good. Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield both should have won the Oscar. The fact that they were nominated beside each other, meaning that they probably split the votes and not one of them being Best Actor and one of them being Best Supporting, but the fact that I think they were both Best Supporting, which was weird, that's beside the point. But they're both just absolutely incredible in this. Like, we already knew. I have you can't see it, but I have back there a Sorry to Bother You vinyl, and obviously, like, Get Out is one of the greatest films of the modern era. Like, we all knew that Daniel Kaluuya and Lakeith Stanfield could act, but Jesus Christ, are they just dominant in this movie. You need to see this film. Fred Hampton forever. Go watch it. It's so important. At number 13, we have Pig. This is the Michael Sarnowski, Nicolas Cage lost his truffle pig movie, which I think has been erroneously compared to John Wick. I understand the comparison of guy loses animal, but that's about where the comparisons in these movies stop. So don't go into this thinking it's John Wick with a pig. It's not. It's a very different movie. This movie addresses the way we approach grief and our relationships to people, and the way sort of the limelight works in some way, people's value when it comes to their careers. There's a lot of really nuanced, complex stuff happening in this script. But what it turns out to be is arguably my favorite Nicolas Cage performance ever. He gets so much out of so little here. And Michael Sarnowski and the team behind this movie are so smart for when they allow Nick Cage to go full wacky Nick Cage and when they rein him in. And I think that's the brilliance of this movie. Because Nick Cage can be a little kooky. We all know this. But when he's allowed to do that in the terms of a character, but then is brought back into sort of a more still, quiet performance, it can be really powerful. And that's where this movie shines most. I also just love some of the shots in this. I really love the plot quite a lot. It never goes exactly where you think it's going to go, and I respect that. I love the way this movie resolves. And I think Nick Cage gives one of the best performances of the year, which is a sentence I didn't expect myself to say, but here we are. At number 12, we have Censor. Prano, Bailey, Bond. Prano, Bailey, Bond. Oh my God, this movie. I had never heard of Prano, Bailey, Bond or Liam Algar, the star of this movie. I had heard of very little of this movie other than I saw a recommendation, I believe it's from Red Letter Media, saying this movie was good, and that was all I needed. You know, I don't need much to go watch a movie. And holy shit, this blew me away. This is a movie about, in the sort of like satanic panic era, the people who would censor films so that they could go out for rental. Liam Algar's character Enid, she works as a censor, and she is the type of person that goes in and cuts out these horrid snuff film type things in these B movies. And the plot from there about her digging deeper into these films and how her own history is brought into it, and the sort of depiction of this surrealist, what's real, what's not kind of thing is done so brilliantly. It's one of my favorite horror movies of the year. The last 30 minutes of this, I think, are bliss when it comes to horror filmmaking. I love everything about the last 30 minutes of this. There's something they do so cleverly that I don't want to talk about, but I really do. It's so smart. I love any sort of movie that goes to the fullest lengths to show a character's falling apart, and this movie does that brilliantly. Highly, highly, highly recommend this movie. At number 11, we have Spencer. I was absolutely crazy about this movie after I watched it, so that should tell you how much I like all 11 of these movies to come. With Pablo Larraín at the helm and Kristen Stewart, to me, absolutely eating as Princess Diana. This movie was probably going to be good no matter what it ended up being, but the fact that it is a snapshot of Diana's life, of this 48-hour window, as opposed to this larger, we're going to try to tell her whole life story like The Eyes of Tammy Faye did, is such a fresh air thing for me when it comes to a biopic. Now, this is my first time seeing a Pablo Larraín movie. He might have done a similar thing with Jackie, I'm not sure. Like, Kristen Stewart is just breathtaking in this. So much of her acting is not spoken. Specifically, it's physical, and specifically in her hands. Her hands are so active and portraying the energy. I looked a little fat man, a little coat there. They're so active and energetic and really give you a larger sense of the emotion of her character, and just the slight uncomfortableness of the crown when it came to Diana is so well portrayed. I admittedly probably like this movie more than people who might know this story better than I do. I don't know much. I should say I didn't know much about Diana coming into this. So for me, this was all very, wait, what? This is what it was like? I understand if you know the story, it's going to be a little less interesting. But yeah, I loved this, and I think Kristen Stewart absolutely kills in this. Also, her outfits. I know this is just true to Diana in general, but oh my God, was she well dressed? Like, I can't even wear the items of clothing that Diana wears half the time, but I want to wear all the outfits she wears in this movie because they're so sick. All right, we're in the top 10. We're in the home stretch. Thank you if you're still watching. Thank you for still watching. I know this has gone longer than I expected it to. At number 10, we have Bo Burnham's Inside. Now, whether you call this a film or not, who knows? I'm going to call it one because I think it deserves to be talked about as one. It's one of my favorite things of the year, if you want to call it that. This movie resonated with me, and I know a lot of other people, not only of my age group, but also those of us who have ever dabbled in making any sort of videos or content or whatever you want to call it, living in the social media era, sort of imposter syndrome, anxiety that comes with putting yourself out there in this capacity. There's a lot has been said about this piece already, so I'm not going to go on too much longer. It is interesting too for me to see what people connect with this piece, where for me, my connection was with the sort of more depressed, anxious side of this, whether it's That Funny Feeling or the ending credits song for the movie, or a lot of the more thoughtful, slow stuff. But then I have friends who were like, oh yeah, the Instagram song was great. And I find that super interesting that what Bo has done is created something that can kind of appeal to multiple sides of the generation, while still feeling so himself and not fake in either side of it. Like, to me, the song I connect least with is the Instagram song, but not that I think it's bad. It's just not my kind of thing. Or maybe like the FaceTiming with my mom song. Like, those are kind of the sillier stuff that didn't land as much with me, but for some people, those are the shining highlights, and maybe the depressed, anxious stuff is a little too sad for their liking. Whatever. I think that's super interesting in how almost all, it's almost like a buffet of generational woes, and you can kind of just take your pick of what plate you want to grab. I think this is one of the only portrayals of the limitations of COVID that I will appreciate in film. I'm kind of the school that once this is over, I don't want to ever see anything about COVID ever again. But Inside and the limitations, it's often said that limitations are the vehicle to art, right? The more limitations you put on yourself, the better a creator you can be. And I think Bo Burnham having these limitations of not being able to leave his apartment and having to light and record and film and edit everything himself, not only had him make the most in-depth, thoughtful special he's made, but also probably the most him special he's made. And I super appreciate that. Coming at number 9, we have Mass. I'm going to be straight up. This movie is hella heavy. It is probably the heaviest film this year. It is about the parents of a child who died in a tragic school shooting having a conversation with the parents of the kid who did it. And that is enough of a pitch to make most people go like, oh God. And if you have that reaction, that is what a lot of this film is. It is just so uncomfortable and awkward and gross and just nuanced with pain and suffering and depictions of grief. But what the shining star of this movie are its actors' performances. Fran Kranz, or I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing their name, Fran Kranz does a pretty good job of directing here. It's a pretty simple setup for a movie, but all four of the actors, Reed Birney, who I've seen in a million things and love, Ann Dowd, Jason Isaacs, and Martha Plimpton, they are all just on top of their game here. I'm not a theater person. I know that Reed Birney at least comes from that theater world. I'm not a theater person, but this feels very much like a stage play in the right sort of ways. It is a vehicle for actors. The movie is very minimal in a lot of its approaches to things outside of portraying the actors and giving them the best lens to perform here. And like I said, it is heavy. It is partially cathartic. It's suspenseful in a way that not many other movies are. It's grieving. It's so loaded. And of course, Mass being a triple entendre, this conversation happens in a church, so there's your Mass there. Obviously, the child is a victim of a mass shooting, but what I talked about earlier, the weight, the mass of this conversation is so apparent throughout the entire film, and the fact that they don't shy away from that and just, yep, this is what would happen, is gonna stick with me for several years to come. At number 8, we have a movie that some people may not call a 2021 movie, and that's okay, but as per my definition earlier, I think it fits. Saint Maud. This movie was released in 2019 on the festival circuit, but because of COVID was delayed, was released in the UK only in 2020, and then to the US public in 2021. So for me, the first time I could watch it was this year. I'm calling it a 2021 movie. Fight me. This is one of my favorite horror movies of the year. You know, depending on what you call a couple of the other movies later, this might be my favorite pure horror movie of the year. I think this film is so unsettling. What Rose Glass, the director here, achieves is absolutely mind-boggling. I, through probably 80 of this 85-minute runtime, was not sure if I liked this movie or not. And by the last 5 minutes, it became one of my favorite movies of the year, almost like that. It is so interesting and weird and unique to the horror landscape. I've never seen a film quite like this before. Morfydd Clark and Jennifer Ale are dynamos in this. They are both just these sort of yin and yang, contrasting, but also kind of the same characters. And the way the movie chooses to depict not only religion, which is obviously going to be part of this movie, but interpersonal relationships and being young but awkward, and there's so many layers to this, and like devotion to your religion is so fascinating. This movie gives me some Rosemary's Baby vibes in the I don't really know what's going on, but I'm uncomfortable department, and I think that's part of its beauty. The ending of this movie is my favorite ending all year because it gives you such a payoff to the confusion and unsettling nature of most of this film. I'm not going to spoil anything, but it definitely puts the dot on the I you're not sure is an I or an L the entire movie. And that I respect so much, and I'm so glad it did it, because that just, it was one of the most euphoric, oh my God, okay, moments I've seen in a film, and I get so excited to talk about it. I want to see it again, knowing what I know now from the ending, and it's so creepy and so weird and is genuinely like scary at times, but in that great like psychological horror way and not like a jump scary way. It's just Oh, it's so good. At number 7, we have Red Rocket. Simon Rex is fucking awesome. That is the sort of headline to my review of Red Rocket. This was actually my first Sean Baker film. I've not seen The Florida Project. I've not seen Tangerine. They're both on my list to watch this year. And oh my God, I'm so impressed with the way he writes and directs movies. Like, this is such a great portrayal of, as someone from small town South, the small town South addict culture, I guess. I don't really know exactly what to call it, but the fact that, you know, only a few of these actors are actors that have been in films before, and a lot of these seem to just be people pulled in specifically for this movie, gives it a realism that is, it doesn't shy away from the type of people that would be in this situation. And I have known the type of people who would be in this situation. Dad is an alcoholic, so growing up, I knew people who went to AA, and I knew sober people, and I knew addicts, and this is such a real portrayal of that. And yes, part of it is so depressing, but it's also so funny. This kind of approach to filmmaking is really that comedy from sadness type of comedy, which I guess all comedy is derived from sadness, but specifically, it's not cheap, it's earned, and it's just it's so damn funny. It's so, I don't want to say heartwarming, but it is charismatic. And part of that is due to Simon Rex's just incredible performance in this. He is likable and weirdly attractive for this like sleazy, kind of gross, manipulative guy. He has so many layers going on in this performance. And Susanna Son, who I had never seen anything, it seems like she's only been in a couple of things. She might be my like breakout star of 2021. If that was a thing in the Oscars, she should win it because she is incredible in this and keeps up with Simon Rex so well. The rest of the cast is good too, but I think those two really own this movie. Also, the sort of musical through line through this, not like in a musical sense, but the song through line in this is beautifully done. Surprising that apparently they almost didn't get the rights to the song used. I'm not going to spoil what it is. This movie just has so much character, good and bad. It's just a great piece of filmmaking. At number 6, we have The French Dispatch. I love Wes Anderson. I think the odds that you'll like this movie almost directly hinge on if you like Wes Anderson's filmmaking style or not, because this might be the most Wes Anderson movie, if that makes any sort of sense. So the cast is spectacular. The visuals are so incredible and unique to Wes Anderson in the ways that, you know, everything is shot at 90 degrees and it's sometimes almost shot like a stage, and in one sense it's literally shot like a stage. And there are elements from his live action filmmaking past, like Grand Budapest and the way they shoot action scenes in that, and also from his animated past, both directly and also just the way he sequences things in the shot. I saw a lot of Isle of Dogs in this, specifically in the first story. The structure of it is something that I think is kind of a hot topic for debate, whether, you know, this idea of 3 short stories basically being the 3 acts of your movie, whether that works or not. For me, it did. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I kind of liked that they kept changing it up entirely, and there was just this one bubble narrative to kind of cover everything. I get completely why people aren't attaching to this. For me, this is probably my second favorite Wes movie behind Grand Budapest, just because there's so much visually going on. Obviously, as someone who deals with visual stuff all day, I am maybe more drawn to that than some other people, and that's totally okay. But the layering and the depth and the density of even just visual jokes in this is so incredible. I'm curious if it'll maintain this high a spot on rewatch, but the first time I watched it, it was just a whirlwind of fun for however long the runtime is. From here on out, all of these are 5-star movies. It's kind of just what I'm feeling that day, but this is my top 5. At number 5, we have Come On, Come On. This is the Mike Mills directed black and white Joaquin Phoenix film with the kid Woody Norman. And this is just one of the most heartfelt. I said Minari might be the sweetest film all year. This is close, and I think for me resonated even more emotionally. This is just about the connection of adults with kids, really, and how kids can be a new lens into the world that we're so used to. Their sort of newness to everything can give them such a fresh approach to things we already know. And I thought this movie looked great and felt great, but the strength of this is its emotional resonance. It almost reminds me of Room in that way, where it is just a very talented actor with a very talented kid actor, and their budding relationship over the course of the film is so special. And both films made me cry a lot. I will say this movie was made even more special because I got to watch it with my mom. And, you know, being around your parent in a movie where it's about Joaquin Phoenix isn't Woody Norman's dad, but he's his uncle, and about that sort of familial bond, that obviously is going to heighten the specialness of this. A lot of the things I said about Minari apply to this film as well, but even probably more so. It is a warm hug. It is genuinely very funny. Like, there's a lot of really funny moments, especially with some of the other kids. It's also a really good look into the way we treat children, especially in like the American educational system, and the burdens children have to bear in some families, especially. Like, it's a very nuanced story. And the heart of it is Joaquin Phoenix's weird, almost like charismatic, drunken, homeless man, persona mixed with taking care of this cute, inquisitive, loving kid. And that just makes for a really special movie. And it's top 5 for me. I loved it. Coming in at number 4, we have a film that I've already talked a lot about on this channel, The Green Knight. If you want to see my full review of this, and hopefully this is something I can do more in the future, you can go watch the Green Knight video on this channel. But to give you a quick summary, this is probably my favorite fantasy thing possibly ever. What David Lowery and A24 were able to do here, where they take this fantasy myth and reshape it into something that I, a person who has so much trouble connecting with fantasy, so easily connected with, is, to me, an absolute feat. Part of that is my love for Dev Patel, who I've been a fan of for absolute years now, from Slumdog Millionaire to The Newsroom to a whole host of other projects he's done. Seeing him get to be the star of this big, expansive, strange, surreal world is always going to be a recipe for a good time. But even some of the supporting actors, who I also love, like Alicia Vikander and Barry Keoghan, and like the whole cast is great. What I think this film does so brilliantly, though, and again, sorry if you've seen my video and I'm repeating myself, is it mixes this world of, it's fantasy, so we don't know what the rules of their world are, mixed with, we don't even know how much of this story is actually what happened, as opposed to what we're being told after the fact, as opposed to, is some of it dreams? Like, the uncertain nature of the surrealist approach to this makes it so special and so unique, and I just absolutely adore this thing. Again, you can hear me talk more about it in that video, but it's maybe my favorite fantasy thing of all time. Okay, the top 3 here is incredibly close. They were almost like splitting hairs, but I think this is where I've landed on them. Coming in at number 3, we have Derek Delgaudio's In and of Itself. I have not seen this film talked about by anyone else, at least in the like sort of letterboxed sphere that I'm in. This maybe doesn't even count as a film, but I don't really know what else to count it as. This is another one of those things that I really don't want to spoil what it is. It's part stage play, it's part performance art. I don't want to give too much away, but as far as a piece of media resonating with me, this is up there in the last few years of films that have resonated to my core. I've watched this film probably 4 or 5 times since I initially watched it, and it resonates a different way each time, but I've cried each time. There are moments in this that absolutely just destroy me and break my heart, but also there are moments in this that are so uplifting, and none of it feels contrite. Sorry, so I should talk about what this is a little bit. Derek Delgaudio is the person on stage. Again, I don't want to give too much away. So he is the person on stage at this performance piece. It was done like 300 times in this New York theater. It's directed by Frank Oz, who you may know from like The Muppets, who was in attendance of the show, and then they got together and made this film. It is just the filming of several performances of his stage play. But this dives so far into our identity and how we treat who we are and how we label ourselves and how we tell stories about ourselves. And it is introspective, again, without coming off as hoity-toity or snobby in any way. It's so genuine and yet so analytical. It's unlike anything I've ever seen. I don't really have a comparison at all to it, because every comparison that I've heard made to it isn't quite accurate enough. So go seek it out. Everyone, I will say, this maybe has the highest approval rating of things I've recommended to friends. So just go check it out. Don't read anything about it. Just go click play. I think it's on Hulu in the US. And just go find it and go watch it. Coming in at number 2, my second favorite film of 2021 is Titane. This is the Julia Ducournau movie starring Agatha Roussel, who is an absolute wonder star in this, and also Vincent Lindon. This is the French movie about... How do I describe Titane without spoiling it? It is a drama. It's part suspenseful thriller. It's part body horror. It is one of the strangest, hardest things to describe that I've ever seen. But I was absolutely enraptured by this film. It is possibly the most I can't take my eyes off the screen film that I've seen since Parasite. It has, I guess that is the closest comp I can come up with, is Parasite, where you never really know what genre it's supposed to be or what direction it's going, but it just keeps moving. And you keep, at least in my case, being transfixed by it. Like it is one of the strangest films I've ever seen. So the beginning premise, I guess, is that this woman she works at like this car show kind of thing, and she's a dancer, and then, you know, men are hitting on her, and she sort of takes that into her own hands. And that's about as far as I want to go with it, because this movie, while that setup might make you think it's going one way, it doesn't. Trust me on that. And this is one of those movies that's not going to be everybody's cup of tea. It is fucking strange, and it goes for it. But when I tell you that I absolutely fell in love with Julia Ducournau's directing style, and how much I want to see Raw now, and I will watch this year for sure, and how excited I am for whatever her next film is going to be, this is just one of those kingmaker type films for a director in Julia Ducournau. She is absolutely incredible. Agatha Roussel also is just dynamic in this. Some of the best, quite possibly the best visuals all year as well, with the different lightings and the way they use the really wide aspect ratio, and the way they choose to shoot dialogue and setting, and sort of like the sleazy aspect of this movie, but then also the really heartfelt stuff. It's very strange, and I don't want to give too much away, but go watch it. And then coming in at number 1, my absolute favorite movie from 2021 is Shiva Baby, which may not surprise many of you who've heard me talk about movies all year. This has been my number 1 for some time now. I actually rewatched it last night in preparation for this video, and it only cemented the fact that it's my favorite film of the year. This is about as perfect a film for what it was trying to do as I can imagine. Everything about this movie I now love and want to see everything from Emma Seligman, who directs and writes, obviously my favorite movie of the year, to Rachel Sennett, who is so funny and so sexy and so emotionally complex and so great at portraying the major emotion of this movie, which is anxiousness. This is an anxious ass movie. And as someone who had multiple panic attacks literally yesterday, this is one of my favorite portrayals of panic attack type situations on film. This movie never gives you a second to breathe. It's only 77 minutes, and it is just unrelenting anxiety, but in a way that is so funny and observational to the plight of the situation. So she's going to a Shiva, which is, I believe, and I'm by no means an expert on Jewish culture, so sorry if I'm getting this wrong. Rachel Sennett's character is going to Danielle is going to a Shiva, where basically it is a post-funeral gathering where everyone eats. We do something similar in the South, but I don't know that we have a name for it. And it is just almost the entirety of this movie happens within this house during this Shiva. But the way they portray the buildup of anxiety and just how being around, you know, family members with all of these unrelenting expectations of like, when are you going to find a boyfriend, or what are you doing with your life? And, you know, the weight of all of those well-meaning relatives asking about your future, but how suffocating those questions can be, mixed on top of her personal life and the people she knows and the history that she has with these people at the Shiva. It's just, it's anxiety with 1,000 arrows. Like, it is just an absolute barn burner of anxious comedy. I can't do embarrassing comedy, but anxious comedy I can do in loads. And this is so funny and so charismatic and probably the hottest film I've seen without any nudity. I could wax poetic for days about how much I love this movie. And I definitely think you should see it, especially if you are as anxious as I am. You will probably relate to a lot, if not all, of this film. And Rachel Sennett is my best actor for the year, and Emma Seligman is probably my best director. This thing is immaculate. And that's it. It took a little bit longer than I thought, but I'm glad that I got to share in detail my top 40 movies of the year. What were your top however many movies of the year? It doesn't have to be 40. But I would love to hear what your top movies they are. Seriously, not only to see how they compare with the list that I've just said, but also compare it with other friends, and maybe there's some stuff that I've not heard of that I can give a watch, and maybe we'll add to this list. Like I said, it'll live forever on Letterboxd. Obviously, this video is at one point in time, but I look forward to doing more videos about movies. I look forward to doing more sort of retrospective lists like this in the future. I'm going to do one for albums later in the year. We're going to do a podcast about our top games of the year, so stay tuned for those if you're interested. But if you've stuck out this long, holy shit, thank you for watching and listening to me talk about movies for so long. Have a good day. Okay, bye.